It's me, breaking news! So yes, if you didn't hear, apparently there is, actually at the time of recording, last I checked, it hadn't closed yet. It was on the verge of doing so. It might have closed or it might have fallen apart by the time I get this video out, we'll see. But Nintendo is closing a deal to give movie rights to Illumination Animation for Super Mario Brothers, which means the Mario movie that nobody really was asking for after the last one we got, could very well end up being probably animated this time, which I think after how the live action version went, most people are favoring that. I'm a little less sure about what to think about this news for a couple of reasons. I mean, the first is Illumination is not a bad animation studio, but I look at their track record and it's Despicable Me, Minions, Secret Life of Pets. There are a couple of movies they made that are genuinely bad. Some of them, that's not all of them. It's not even the majority of them, but like, at least to my way of thinking, their movies have topped out at being fine. Oh, that was fine. Couple of good moments. That was fine. And I kind of wish there was somebody with, if not a stronger track record, at least like a single, like really good movie that I could point to. Well, they did that one time, so maybe we can get that level with Mario. And I don't feel like Illumination has that. I mean, heck, even Sky Blue Studios, the Ice Age people, even they have, you know, the Peanuts movie, which is genuinely really, really good. So, I mean, that's the only thing on their lineup that's really good. But even they have one thing. So it's hard for me to get excited with this animation studio, and to steal a line from Bob Chipman, now that it's paired with the studios, place your bets. Is it going to be the Shy Guys, the Yoshis, or the Toads that are going to be Mario's answer to the Minions? Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that if they wanted to go animated, Nintendo was in a bit of a, I don't want to say a tight spot, but their options probably weren't what they would like to have been. Disney was probably never an option, because Disney these days, if Disney doesn't really like to license things anymore. They like to own them. So unless Disney steps up to buy Nintendo lock, stock, and barrel, which I don't want them to ever do, then I don't see that ever having happened. I mean, maybe Sony Animation might have been a better place for them to land in terms of their track record, because, you know, they gave us things like Collided with a Chance of Meatballs, which was really good. But, of course, Sony, they own the PlayStation, and that is one of Nintendo's rivals, so they were probably out. I mentioned Sky Blue. I mean, you know, despite even the early comparison that I made, Sky Blue, really the only reason the Peanuts movie turned out as good as it did is because the Schultz family were really hands-on in making sure that honored the legacy of Charles Schultz's work. So unless Nintendo's prepared to dig into that level, which they might be, because I think I had heard before that part of the reason Nintendo was so, I mean, aside from kind of really being badly burned by the first Super Mario Brothers movie, part of the reason they were slow to get things going was they wanted a fairly decent amount of input on the process. And that sounds good, except that Ubisoft had a pretty good level of influence on the Assassin's Creed film. And the thing is, they may know the characters in the property, but they're not filmmakers. They don't, the dictations of video game makers may not be a good thing to have when someone's trying to craft a movie. Now, I mean, I'm totally fine with them being like, no, like that idea is way too off what we want to do, but I really hope they're not going to try and dictate structure, story arcs, character arc, or that they'll even allow them to do character arcs and possibly do something a little unexpected with them, because otherwise, I mean, I think we just end up with basically an extended cutscene. I mean, I mean, I've talked about this with video games before. I think the inherent problem with the vast majority of video game properties is their stories and characters are not built for film. They're not built to be observed. They're built to be played. And that's why so many of these characters especially the iconic ones, are pretty thinly sketched out. You don't need a ton of depth to really get into them because you're controlling them directly, and that does create a bond between player and player avatar. And removing that, a lot of these characters, they're really thinly sketched out. Knowing how defensive Nintendo's probably going to be about the characterizations, I have to wonder if they're going to allow a studio to sort of do what you'd have to do with the character to give them an arc, give them a journey, make them interesting. Of course, I say that. The other problem with it doing animation as opposed to live action, and no, this is not me saying they should do a live action movie, but there's a tendency by not all animation studios, but a fair number of them, that when they make something that is blatantly for kids, that they don't try as hard. They're more willing to dip into cliches and stereotypes and tropes because they figure they can get away with it because the audience is kids. Kids don't care. And that's always a shame, and it's why, like, the really great animated movies will always have a special place in my heart, you know, classics and new ones, because anyone who looks at animation and doesn't go, oh, you know, it's kid stuff, we don't have to try hard, but instead goes, you know what, let's try harder. Let's give really quality entertainment to people at an early age. I will always admire that, but I look at this lineup, this pairing, and I can't say I'm thrilled. I'm not going, it's going to stink. I don't think it will. I think it'll probably be fine and functional and basically a cash-in on Mario in an attempt to expand things. Now, that said, I do hope it actually succeeds, mainly because there are other Nintendo properties that I would like to see adapted to film much more than Mario. I mean, the thing with me and Mario at this point is I have a nostalgic grab onto Mario. I mean, I have it's behind the Cards Against Humanity, but I've got an original NES. So, you know, and still, I grew up on Nintendo. I grew up on Mario. I love this stuff, but I don't really have a dog in this race at this point. I still enjoy playing Mario games, but I don't have, you know, a real, oh, beloved character feeling to Mario as a character when I am not controlling him. There are other characters and other stories, though, that I think are begging for at least somebody to try and see what they can do. I know a lot of people are going to say Zelda. And I mean, as far as size of properties that Nintendo has, that's probably the next one on the list. I don't think a Zelda movie is going to be that good. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate just for even suggesting that. But look, here's the thing about Zelda is ultimately a pretty generic fantasy world and fantasy story. And I'm not saying that as a knock on the games. I love the Zelda games. But the fact that it's generic is fine in the game because you are getting to experience it. You are getting to experience the depth of this. But it is ultimately still a fairly generic world and a fairly generic story. I mean, there are fairy-like elf forest people. There are the fish people who live in the water. There are the kind of rock people who live in the mountains. There's the prophesied hero on a chosen one journey to rescue a princess and get a magic weapon and kill him. I mean, it's incredibly generic. And in a game, that's fine because you get to play that. You get to experience that. In a way, having it be more generic is almost to its benefit as opposed to having it go really off the rails and be really unique in terms of characterization and story movement, because you get to feel like you are on that epic quest, and having it painted in those broad strokes works. You actually translate that to film, and I don't know what there is to do with it other than just have the novelty of, oh, this time the hero is Link, and you know they'll have to cast an actor and give him a voice, and fanboys everywhere will hate it for whatever reason because that's what'll happen. The property that I want to see, the Nintendo property, I think just is begging for somebody to take a crack at it, is Metroid. Oh, the world needs Samus Aran right now. So I mean, I still feel like in many ways we have yet to get a true proper successor to Ellen Ripley or Sarah Connor, that like real kick-ass sci-fi heroine. I feel like we haven't had that really to sort of step up. I'm not to say that we haven't had good heroines, had some great ones, not to say there haven't even been good ones in sci-fi movies. There have been, but I feel like nobody's really taken that torch yet, and I think Samus could. As long as they don't do Other M version of Samus. No. But that's the one I'd really like to see. And I don't have a heavy stake in a Mario movie. If it's good, great. If it's not, well, okay. But I kind of hope it succeeds either way, because I don't want Nintendo to get scared off again. Because I would like to see something done with these properties. Now, I don't think everything works for film. Some things would be better for TV series. Like, if you are gonna do Zelda, TV would be a much better fit for it than a movie, I think. But I would like to see these things expanded, because as much as I rail against the fact that I do honestly think trying to translate a video game into movies is fundamentally a flawed idea, it's something that they're gonna keep trying until somebody makes it work. And if somebody's gonna make it work, I'd kind of like to see it be Nintendo. So yeah, I think I've rambled enough on all that. So those are my thoughts on the news that there's probably going to be an animated Super Mario Brothers movie. What are your thoughts on it? What other Nintendo properties do you think should get a movie or TV treatment? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast. That's available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm also one half of the Punch Like a Girl podcast. That's a presentation of the Fire and Water Podcast Network, fireandwaterpodcast.com. And until next time, this council is adjourned.